Alright, what is up folks? So over the course of this video, I'm going to share with you guys the extremely toxic work culture in East Asian countries, in places like China, like Singapore, like Taiwan, like South Korea, and also like in Japan. And there's a very obvious reason why these places on Earth, they have some of the lowest fertility rates on Earth. As a matter of fact, South Korea is the current title holder for the country with the lowest fertility rate in the world at just 0.68 children per woman. So I want you guys to look at this job posting. By the way, so these job postings, they're all over the country. It's everywhere in China. You can see these job postings at these restaurants. So in the recent years, I would say the last 10, 15, possibly 20 years, there's been an explosion of new restaurants that's opened up in China. And I did cover this in the previous video. The reason why there's so many restaurants is because that, back in the day, cooking and cleaning, that was a job that was designated to the Chinese women. But since third wave feminism has taken over in China, so what's happened in the past 10, 15, 20 years is that a lot of modern Chinese women, they refuse to cook or clean for their man. And as a direct result of this, tens and thousands of brand new restaurants have popped up everywhere all across China. The competition is very fierce. And so I want you guys to look at this job posting. This is very, very typical. It is all across China. There's a severe shortage of restaurant workers in China. And yes, obviously, if you guys have been following the news of what's happening, especially in the Asian countries, obviously what you're seeing is that the youth unemployment rate is skyrocketing, right? I believe last summer it reached to over 20% before China stopped publishing its numbers. Well, here's the thing, right? The jobs are there. They are available for the Chinese youths, because every province that you travel to in China, every city you go to, every street you go to, you'll see these signs from all these restaurants that are hiring. And yes, they do pay a living wage, okay? But this is not the issue. This is the toxic work culture I'm about to cover. So you don't have to understand the characters on there. You see some numbers on there, right? So I'm going to break this down very, very simply for you guys. The work culture, this is not just China. It's very much the same if you go to Singapore, if you try to apply for a job in Taiwan, if you try to go to work in South Korea or in Japan. So this restaurant that's hiring. So let's go down the list, right? The first job listing, it says it pays 5,000 to 7,500 yuan, that is per month. That is a very, very good salary. However, you have to look at the working conditions, right? So if you look at the shift, right, it says 9 to 9:30, so that is 9 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. and that is almost every single day. Go down to near the bottom, it tells you about your time off, right? So you only get 3 days off per month. That's it. So on average, you have to work for roughly 10 days in order to just get 1 day off. And yes, in China, a lot of people call it the 996, right? Oftentimes, it's not even the 996. Oftentimes, it's 997. So the 12-hour shifts, right? A lot of employers in China, they typically don't count your breaks as part of your shift. So a lot of times, typically in a single day, a lot of these people, working 12 hours is not enough. Oftentimes, it's 13, or for this restaurant, it's 12 and a half hours, right? And they expect you to work almost every single day. So you're only given 3 days off per month. Now, that is not even the worst case scenario, right? So 996 implies that, you have to work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. But oftentimes, a lot of people have to work 7. Now, if you're really, really lucky, if you have to, try to go through all of these postings, yes, some restaurants, they do offer you 4 days. That is the maximum you will see. But on average, typically, most restaurant jobs, if you apply to, let's say, become a waiter, to become a chef, to become a dishwasher, to become a busboy, whatever the position they're offering, typically on average, you only get 3 days off per month. Some restaurants are much worse. Some restaurants, they only give you 2 days off or 1 day off. And some restaurants, they don't give you any time off at all. And by the way, this is while you're working 12 or 13 hours every single day. That's what they expect out of you. And obviously, this is going to cause a massive, massive issue, as you guys can imagine, right? That's why so many Chinese youths are laying flat. Because, yeah, I have looked through a bunch of these job postings since I've returned. I'm looking at this, I'm just thinking, would I rather work 80 hours a week, or would I rather be just laying flat at home in my bedroom and leeching off of my parents? So what are your options, right? So that's why so many Chinese youths, they're choosing to lay flat at home, because yeah, the work culture, it's extremely, extremely toxic over here in in East Asia, to the point where it's almost unbearable. If you're wondering, so what about the pay, right? It says that, so the first number you see there, the wage, it says 5,000 to 7,500. So the listing for that one's a cashier. So cashier is pretty much the same as a waiter. So how come there's such a big range? So usually, typically 5,000 yuan, that is your starting wage. And as you stay longer at the restaurant, your wage just goes up. Let's say after 2 years, it probably goes up from 5,000, let's say, to 6,000 or 6,500. The 7,500, that's usually typically what happens is, this is why Chinese people drink so much. So all of the waiters, all of the busboys, all of the cashiers, they get commissions from alcohol sales, only alcohol sales. So if you sell some extra Diet Pepsi or some Fanta or some apple juice, it doesn't do anything. You have to be able to sell as much alcohol as possible, and so they get a certain percentage boost. Let's say, if their starting wage, it's 5,000 yuan per month. After 2 years, it goes up to 6,000. They can earn an extra 1,500 yuan per month just from boosting their alcohol sales. 7,500 yuan per month. That is a very, very good wage, actually. Well, of course, if you didn't have to work over 80 hours a week. So when you're comparing things from the east to the west, right, you have to look at purchasing power parity. So obviously, a loaf of bread and a bag of milk in an average sizing city in China, when you compare it to, let's say, New York City or London or Paris, it's going to be 10 times cheaper. So 7,500 yuan a month, that's roughly just under $1,100 US per month. Obviously, if you were making that kind of money living in New York City, you'd be living on the streets. But let's look at how much a typical average Chinese apartment will cost, right? So here's a listing I found. So this is probably, I would say, slightly above average. I would say 6 out of 10 Chinese apartment. You can see the range is 1,100 yuan to 1,800 yuan. So 1,800 yuan, that is the rent for a upscale 1-bedroom apartment. So, and if you want something that's smaller, if you're just living by yourself, you only need to spend roughly 1,100 yuan. So this is probably more of a bachelor's apartment. And there are some apartments who are much, much cheaper, right? If you're willing to probably share a bathroom with a bunch of other people, if all you need is a tiny bed to sleep on, you can find a place in the average Chinese city for something as little as, I would say, 700 or even 800 yuan, which is roughly $100 US per month. $100 US per month. Now you think about it, these Chinese waiters who are making over $1,000 US per month. That is pretty good because you're only spending 10% of your wages on rent. However, the issue is the working hours. They're absolutely brutal. Listen, to be honest, nobody in this world, unless they're left with no choice, right? Nobody wants to work 80 hours a week. It is absolutely outrageous. Now, a lot of people will have questions from this. They will say, was the Chinese working culture always like this? Not always. Yes, in the past, right, for the past 30, 40, 50, 100 years, China has always had jobs like this where people are forced to work 80, 90, 100 hours a week. They're forced to work themselves to death, right? And it's the exact same thing in Japan. It's the exact same thing in South Korea. It's the exact same thing in Taiwan. And yeah, now the government is trying to reverse this trend. They're wondering why, we have created the most depressed, the loneliest, the most messed up generation. They wonder why, young people are not going out anymore. Young people have no social life. They have no close personal friends. They're not hitting the gym. They're not being active. They're not staying fit, right? They're wondering why young people are not looking for dates. They're not looking for marriage. Well, yeah, because the only option they're being given is to work 80 hours a week. See, now for the previous generation, certainly for members of my family, I'm talking about my dad, my mom, and my stepmom, her sisters, my aunts, my uncles, none of them ever worked jobs like this. This is why in China, education has been so revered, right? Going to university, getting your master's, going to medical school, becoming an engineer, becoming a lawyer, becoming a doctor was extremely important, because back in the day, this was the #1 incentive to escape this type of toxic work culture. Because my mom, I did mention before, she used to work for an accountant before she had a successful business on her own, right? So she ended up going back to school in her adult years. Obviously not in the traditional way. It wasn't university, because you have to remember, when my mama was young, she had to live through the Cultural Revolution. So all the schools in China was closed down for 10 years. And all the universities, all the colleges were all completely closed down. So it was a chaotic time period. But after the Cultural Revolution, after China went through 改革开放, after China's economic reform and opening up to the rest of the world, and many people were offered a chance as adults to come back to school for free. So my mom took the opportunity. She went back to school for free, and she was instantly offered a white-collar job at a hydroelectric company. She worked as an accountant. And so my mom got this opportunity. My dad got the same opportunity. My uncles and aunts, they all got the exact same opportunity. They went back to school for free, 100% free. free, and they all had jobs right after graduation, and they all worked the white-collar jobs. They all worked 40 hours a week. And yes, I have been to my mom's workplace, I have been to my dad's workplace, and most of the time they did absolutely nothing. And most of the time when I showed up, they were just sitting there chatting, socializing, and oftentimes going to work was optional. A lot of times my mom or my dad, they would just simply take Fridays off and not show up to their work because there wasn't so much to do, and they spent most of the time socializing and playing cards. And yes, this type of work environment, right, the 40-hour work week where you just have to sit in front of the computer for a bit and you can get to spin around in your chair, you get to chat, you get to socialize, you get to eat some fruits, you get to eat some cake, play some cards. This type of job was always possible for anybody that had any type of education in China. That's why, you know, these Chinese students, they used to be willing to spend, you know, 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours a day at a school in order to study, in order to get a solid score on their on the high test, on their university entrance exam. This is why, you know, it was so important back in the day for Chinese youth to go to university to get an education, because right after you graduate university, you're pretty much set for life. You will never have to work the 996 or the 997. However, for this generation, it's simply not possible. The jobs that my mom had, the type of jobs that my dad had, my stepmom had, my aunts, my uncles, those type of jobs are long gone. They're no longer there. The 40-hour work week is slowly disappearing from China. A lot of people who are working at these Chinese restaurants, you know, who are working this type of 996 or 997, the 72 to 84-hour work week, a lot of these Chinese people, they're university graduates. A lot of them, they even have their master's degree, but they just simply can't find a job. Everything has gotten so much worse, right? If China, if Taiwan, if Singapore, if South Korea, if Japan, if they want to find a solution to their demographic crisis, to their population suicide, then they will have to do something about their extremely toxic work culture, because yeah, it's pretty much modern day slavery. I mean, how can you expect the people to go on dates, expect the people to enter relationships, to get married, to raise children, when you expect them to work anywhere between 72 to 84 hours a week? Well, they only have 2 or 3 days off per month. So yeah, this is a massive crisis that's happening in East Asia, and it's only getting worse, right? Before, in my mom and dad's generation, the 40-hour work week was possible as long as you went back to school, as long as you went to university, as long as you got yourself a piece of paper. But those jobs are long gone. Everywhere you go, all the job postings you look at, they expect you to work yourself to death. And that is the extreme dark side of capitalism. And there's so much more I want to cover on this topic, because it is extremely important. How come all the good jobs that was available to the previous generation, how come they're all gone? How come the 40-hour work week is not there anymore? How come all the university graduates, they can't find a white-collar job anymore? They're forced to work as a waiter at a restaurant. Even though, yes, the wages, they do pay the bill, but unfortunately you have to work 80 hours a week. How come everything is getting worse, whether you're living in the East or living in the West? Yeah, that is a great question, so I will come back to this topic. Thank you guys so much for staying till the end. I will see you guys next video.